on this computer. Okay.
A little switch.
No, unless you just want to sit in the couch.
I'm good here.
Okay. This is why I like comfortable. We're good. Is it right for you?
Yeah,
Okay.
I just couldn't figure out how to start the PowerPoint.
Little things.
If you guys want to see the visuals while I'm doing it, just motion your hand or something and I can turn it around just in case, like, if you're a visual learner, I know I'm going to be talking. So if you need that moment to see, just let me know.
How to be a bad guy. It feels heavy, doesn't it? I feel it.
Okay, so today we're going to be starting a presentation on being the bad guy. This is going to give you a lot of tips and tricks on how to get your child to learn, to listen, and to see the behavior change that you want to see. So a lot of this is very simplified, and we'll go into a little bit more discussions throughout the session. If there's any specific questions, please message later, and we can definitely get those questions answered for you guys. We're going to go ahead and get started. So today we're going to go over just a quick introduction. We're going to talk about building parent confidence and what skills you need to know and what rights you have. We're going to talk about rewarding your child, and on the flip side, also how to get your child not to do things that they're not supposed to. We're going to talk about following through to get your child to complete tasks. We're going to talk about compromising with your child, if that's applicable for your situation. We're going to talk about satiation and empty threats, and then we're going to end with questions. So to start off, a lot of parents and caregivers of children diagnosed with autism don't really know what rights they have and how to parent their child once they're diagnosed. I have this comment a lot with my parents that they say, well, now that my child is diagnosed, now that I know they're autistic, how do I teach them these things? How do I work with them? Do I just let them get away with things because they're struggling? And so this is something that comes across a lot with a lot of my parents. So we're going to talk about that a little bit later. We're also going to talk about your rights to treatment and understanding why your child behaves the way that they do. And we're going to work on compromising with your kiddo and also talk about some tactics to avoid. And then the overall theme of this is that being the bad guy is good.
Yeah.
It's good for you. It's good for your child. So feel free to be the asshole. It's fine. Okay, so the first thing we're going to talk about is advocating. So it is your child. It is your right to advocate for yourself and for your child. Nobody else is going to do it. Even though it is part of their job description, as soon as they're clocked out, they don't care. That's the reality of anyone with any type of job. There's only so much that they can do. They cannot focus on everything 24/7, but you and your child, that is your 24/7. So you have to advocate for yourself because nobody else is going to do it for you. And so this is something I talked about in one of our other trainings. But the reality of therapy is if your child is getting the maximum amount of hours provided by insurance, which is 40 hours a week for ABA therapy, speech and occupational therapy gives you about 2 hours each week. So if you max out everything, you're getting about 46 hours of service a week. That is only about 23% of your child's life during the week. So even though they're getting the max amount of hours possible, that's not even a quarter of the hours of their week. So only a quarter of their time can a therapist be one-on-one working with them. It's also up to you as the parent, the caregiver, to make sure you're pushing them because they're only going to learn so much in 25% of their week. Like I mentioned right before, is that therapists are only affected during work hours with your kiddo. So they're scheduled with your kiddo 8 to 12. They really only care about your kiddo 8 to 12. As soon as they clock out at 12 o'clock, they're moving on to the next kid, or they're moving on to their next job, or they're moving on to, I'm off of work for the day. I'm going to go, I'm going to do my own kids, or I'm going to do whatever I want to do. So understanding that you have to advocate because it's a job. And we're also only there a very small amount of time if you get maximum hours. Again, if you're only getting like 5 hours a week, 10 hours a week, that's even less.
It's different when you say it. Right?
Yeah. And then another thing is that there are legal consequences for therapies and agencies that do not meet your child's goals within a timely manner. So understand that. So if you're not seeing the results you want to see, understand that you have rights and that they are legally responsible if they do not meet those goals within a timely manner. So that includes in the schools, the IEPs, they have to meet those goals or clarify why those goals were not met within the year of the school. For ABA assessments, very similar to an IEP, those goals need to be met within a timely manner. I'm not an occupational therapist, I'm not a speech therapist, but they also have goals that they have to meet. Very same thing, they need to get those goals met. If they are not getting those goals met, they can be held legally responsible. So advocate for yourself, understand that there are consequences. They're not getting written off because they're not meeting your goals.
I think that's important to notice, that just because you have services doesn't mean that they're worthwhile in any way, shape, or form.
Yep.
If it's not working for your child, it's not working.
Yep.
So.
And that we can go into a lot more detail
Ooh,
later
you
on,
could
because
be the
there's a
bad
lot.
guy with the service provider too.
I can, and I will. Another one that we're going to talk about is your rights to treatment as a client and as the caregiver of a client, especially if they're underage. If they're underage, they're under 18, you are the client as well as the child who's receiving the direct services. If your child is over age, if they're 18 or older, that changes a little bit, but depending on where they're at, you can still be considered the client. You are still involved as part of the treatment team. So some of the basic rights of all clients receiving all types of therapy are that they must provide information about one's diagnosis in order to get proper evaluation and proper treatment. So they have to go into full detail about why you have this diagnosis, why we see that you met the criteria to get this diagnosis. So that way, if you want further evaluation, if you want treatment from other services, you can explain why, because you understand fully what the diagnosis is. Also, all therapies have to provide, they have to give informed participation, which means you know what's happening with your kiddo. You know what's happening with yourself. You are fully included in what's happening. You understand what's happening and why it's happening.
I feel like that's overlooked a lot.
Absolutely. So rather than if someone says, I'm going to teach your child to listen or respond to colors, numbers, and letters, if you have no idea what that means, they have to explain it to where you fully understand what the goal is, not just the blanket statement. Now you understand, no, what does that mean? Break it down for me further if you need. Also that you can refuse service at any time. That is your right. You can stop whenever you want to for no consequences. And that also the client and the families and the caregivers are always treated with respect and dignity. Sometimes that doesn't happen, but that is legally your right to be treated with respect and dignity. And if that is not met, then there are legal repercussions. So as parents to individuals who are underage, you have the right to be involved with treatment planning. So that means coming up with goals that are important to you and your child. Also reducing behaviors that you may want reduced. So if your kiddo throws 20 tantrums a day, maybe reducing that a little bit because it's important to you and your family. If you have a cultural goal that you would like met, that is important to your family, but may not be important to me. Yes, cultural or religious. If it's important to you, I have to provide that for you. Even if I do not believe in that, it doesn't matter because you are the client. That is what you guys want. Understanding why treatments are being used. So if I have a certain treatment and plan, so let's just say a reward system. If we are working on a reward system with your kiddo, understanding why I'm using a reward system. If there's a punishment procedure, why is there a punishment procedure? What does that mean? What are the goods? What are the bads? What are the side effects? Everything. You have to understand the full why something is happening. And then also making sure that you are taught the skills to carry on the treatment outside of the treatment center. So if we're working on toilet training, the therapy has to teach you the skills that they are using to toilet train your kiddo so that way you can do it at home. It doesn't make sense that they only keep those skills to themselves so the kiddo can only be toilet trained in the therapy center. Also, they have to do it at home. They have to do it at Target when you go to Target. They have to do it at school if they're in school or when they do go to school. You have to be taught those skills outside of therapy locations. And again, refusal, you can refuse services without any consequences. So if you decide that skills are not being taught the way you want them to be, if the goals are not being met, or you're just not satisfied with the services, you can stop services and you're not going to be punished for it.
One thing that I don't like from my experience, was always getting a handout.
Okay.
And in the 1 hour that early intervention was there, or
Mhm.
in the 3 minutes max at pickup,
Mhm.
I get a piece of paper with an explanation of how to do a whole therapy.
Yeah.
And that is when I'm like, okay, thanks. And then I never look at the paper again.
Yeah. And so they have to give you more than that. And I'm going to talk about that a little bit later.
Okay.
When it comes to parent trainings, that a slip of paper is not good enough.
Nope.
You have to actually be taught and trained on what we are teaching your kiddos.
Great.
So you are a member of the treatment team and you are part of your child's success. So ensuring that your therapist is providing you with everything that you need for your child's success. And make sure that you have the tools to carry on that success outside of the 4-hour therapy session you may or may not be getting. So we are going to go into some more of the rights that you have in different therapies. So I have school that we're going to go into details, especially with the IEP plan, the individualized treatment plan. Nope, individualized education plan. We're going to go into that, what you need to know for the meetings, what it should look like, so that way you're prepared when those happen. We're also going to go into specifically behavior therapy, which is what I do. Again, I'm not an occupational therapist or a speech therapist, so I cannot give you that information, but I do have some basics. I have to.
I know. And
Okay.
one of the things that I think is important just to note is that when you're how to be a bad guy is basically about making the other person uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And it's not you shouldn't feel one way about making somebody else feel uncomfortable because you're doing what's best for your child.
Yeah.
Whether it is your child or
Mhm.
your child's teacher or your child's B.C.B.A.
Yeah.
It's about, I think that's what the biggest problem is that people don't like to be confrontational, but then we wait until it's a blow up time and then nothing gets solved the right way.
So you have to be the bad guy and advocate for yourself and your child in order to get the results you want. If you
No matter
don't,
who it is with.
no matter who it's with, it's important. And if you don't know some of the basic rights that you have or the basic procedures and what they are required to do, they can run all over you, regardless of what therapy it is, regardless of what agency it is. If they know that you don't know, they're not going to meet all the requirements that they are legally required to do. And you won't know any different. So they keep getting away with not meeting the legal requirements because nobody's calling them out. So this is giving you guys some of the basics to call them out and make sure you're getting the services you are legally required to get and you should get. So we're going to talk about behavior therapy. So for services, always client confidentiality. We are never going to talk about your kiddo outside of the people that are authorized for us to talk to them about. So if you as a parent, you sign that mom, dad, grandma, grandpa, and the babysitter can all know about therapy, then those are the 5 people we can talk about who are outside of the center. So that is part of your treatment team. Those are people that we are legally allowed to talk about your kiddo, like they had a great day. Here's everything that they did. Here are the programs they're working on. But if you had a new babysitter come in, we are not legally allowed to give them that information. We drop off your kiddo with your permission. It's already been explained that there's a new babysitter coming in, but we're not going to go into any detail about your kiddo. That includes if we are out in public, we're never going to say anything about your kiddo. A lot of the times the practice is that if you see a client in public, you essentially pretend that they're not there to not single them out. Be like, oh, I'm in my work t-shirt that says behavior therapy on it. I'm going up to you and your family in a public location where people may not know that you're diagnosed, but now from my t-shirt, me interacting with your kiddo, now I'm revealing to wherever we're at that your kiddo is diagnosed. So we protect your confidential information at all costs. A lot of places will use like code names or like numbers to talk about kiddos just to protect their privacy in case the exterminator's walking through the building. All of that information is kept as secret as we can to keep you guys safe. Also, every single therapy has their own ethics code. Every ethics code is going to vary a little bit, but those are legal guidelines of how we work, how we provide services, how we treat you and your kiddos. So ask about those anytime you start services so that way you know what we are allowed and what we are not allowed to do. And if those rules are ever broken, immediately there's legal consequences for that.
I do know that we do get all of this written and we just sign our lives away.
Yeah.
Because I can tell you from even just making flyers, we don't read a darn thing. We get it, we gotta sign it to make this happen, we sign it.
Yep.
And people, where is it? What time? I'm like, there was only half a page. That's all you had to look at. And that's on a easy day.
Yeah.
So when we're giving us, I mean, seriously, did you read all that stuff? Cause I know I didn't. I signed it so that we would get started.
Like half, and then I'm like, oh, this is taking too long.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's like, I feel rushed too, because they're waiting for you to sign it and give it back to them.
And so that's again where like you can be the bad guy and be like, no, I'm going to read every single fine point of this. Just sit there and wait until I'm done reading. Or you can ask for copies and like, I'm going to take these home, read them. I'll come back or I'll sign them, bring them back in. Some places will give you copies of all of the documents that you just signed. So that way you can at least go home and read it in your free time. You've already signed it. So that can cause a little bit of legal difficulties, but at least you have all that information physically on you. So that way you can read it. If you have a question later on, like, I don't know if this really makes sense. You can go back through the paperwork and you can worry about the signatures later, but at least you know, and you have physical proof of what you signed. Some places will just have you sign, they take the paperwork and you have no idea what you signed.
Yeah.
So make sure that you're advocating for yourself to read all the fine print or figure out a solution to, I'm going to take all these home. I'm going to sign what I'm comfortable with. I'm going to come back in with unsigned documents so you can answer these questions. Definitely make sure you're doing that. I know it's hard to do that. I do that anytime I go to any office that requires paperwork. I'm like, okay, just trying to get through this. Like my taxes, I had to sign so many forms for my taxes. I have no idea what I signed. So we all understand that. But when it comes to you and your kiddo and something super significant like therapy services, take that time. Even if it's annoying, take that time because it's important to you.
I'll do it for an IEP, but I've never done it for anything else. So, and buying a house until I didn't know what it said, and then I just signed.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's just really overwhelming to read a lot of that.
It absolutely is. And I don't disagree. There's a lot of paperwork. It is overwhelming, but figure out a way to compromise with them and be like, let me take this home, come back and sign it, or just figure out something that works for you.
Yeah.
Every therapy service is required to provide evidence-based practices, which means that we have determined, we have scientifically tested that this works. We're not going to randomly tell you to start taking ashwagandha pills because we think they'll make you feel better. No, we have to scientifically prove that this works. And once we have that proof that it works, then we can recommend it to you. But we can't just willy-nilly come up with stuff and say, this is what we're going to do. You have to have that proof of what you're doing is going to work. Also, every place has to have trained providers. That varies per clinic, that varies per therapy provider, but they have to be trained. That could be agency trained. It could be full statewide training. It really depends on where you're going, but they do have to be trained. They can't just walk through
Like
the door.
OGP trainings for like job coaches versus, got it.
Also, with applied behavior analysis and behavior therapy, per insurance, there is a minimum amount of hours that parents receive training each week. So what that means is that whenever they assess your kiddo, they come up with the goals, parents are also included in those goals. Their insurance is legally required to provide parent goals. So if I were to write an assessment, every parent has to have some type of goal. And they are required to have weekly hours. They are definitely less hours, so you're not going to get 40 hours a week of trainings, but 2 hours a week, 4 hours a week, 1 hour a week. Those are guaranteed hours that you get every single week to work on things that are important to you. That is required in insurance assessments. So make sure you ask about that if you're receiving any type of behavior therapy, especially if it's insurance funded, because there has to be a parent goal in there and you have to know what that parent goal is. And you as a parent can decide what that goal is. If toilet training is something huge you guys are working on in the next 6 months, have that be your goal. I want to know how to toilet train my kiddo. If you
can't wait to find out what my goal is.
Exactly. So definitely reach out if you have one and see what that assessment says, see what the parent goal is. And again, that's every week. One of the companies I work for, I meet with my parents every single week. We have a certain goal that we go through. And even if I don't focus on that goal that day, I'm at least taking that time to talk about what progress have you seen? What struggles are you seeing? What has changed over the last week that I may not know about? So you at least have that weekly conversation with your therapist to figure out what's going on, to give them updates rather than maybe once a month or maybe when you see them for the 2-minute drop off from pickup. That's not enough time to go through everything.
Mm.
So look through your assessments, reach out to your therapist and ask them, what are my parent goals? Another thing is, again, with behavior therapy, is that assessments are done every 6 months. So every 6 months, parent goals are updated. If they met a goal, it's replaced with something else. So every 6 months, there needs to be progress, and you need to see what that progress is too. If you have 20 goals and none of those goals were met over 6 months, that's a good indicator of something's happening. Either they're not really working with my kiddo as they should, maybe the techniques they're using does not work for my kiddo, or maybe something else is going on that I'm not aware of, because in 6 months, my kiddo should have picked up something. Even if it's only 2 hours a week, they should have learned something. Why aren't they learning? So that's a good indicator to see maybe something's going on that you may not be aware of. Again, specifics vary based on state regulations, the agency's rules and expectations, and your child's specific needs. But these are some basics that you can expect to have in any type of behavior therapy. And these are a lot of things that a lot of parents don't know about, but working as that being part of my job, I know that those are my expectations that I have to legally give to insurance and parents. Again, not an occupational therapist, not a speech therapist, but they are required to talk to you about their HIPAA, what they're going to do to protect your child's specific information, as well as your specific information. They also have their own ethics code that they have to follow, so ask about that. And always ask for your rights as a person receiving therapy. Every place is going to be a little bit different, but that will outline what they are legally required to give you. So if that means I'm legally required 24 hours notice of any cancellation, make sure that they're giving you 24 hours notice. If they don't, you sign the contract, they sign the contract, they are legally have to be held to that standard that they need 24 hours for cancellation of service. That's a small one, but still that gives you a good understanding of what you're legally able to have, and if they don't meet those expectations, what those consequences are. In school, we're going to talk about the individualized education plan, the IEPs. So those, the goal of the IEP is to provide supports and create goals for the child to succeed in school. That's going to vary kiddo by kiddo, what supports they need, and also what type of goals they're working on. So the members of every IEP meeting should include the child, if they're able to be included. Some kiddos may not be able to fully understand what's happening, so they may not be included. But if they're older and they have those skill sets to advocate for themselves and say, this is what I need, this is what I don't need, this is what I want to work on, this is what I don't want to work on, they can definitely be included. They should be included if they can. That includes any parents or caregivers that are primary, that are always involved with the kiddo. So if it's a grandparent who lives in home and is with your kiddo for 6 hours out of the day while you're at work, they should be included. It also includes any teachers. It also includes any therapists. So if there's an occupational therapist, they should be included. If there's a speech therapist, they should be included. If there's any behavior therapy, they should be included. If there's a mental health counselor, they should be included. Anyone who is working with your child should be included in every single IEP meeting.
So I think we had this conversation when we were talking about doing this training. And one of the major questions that I've always had is, why are behavior techs not in IEP meetings? And they, knowing, because they're the ones that spend the most amount of the time with your child. So, and usually it's because they can't bill for that hour. Right?
Yeah.
But why, if they're still working for your child, why, I mean, insurance wise, like, can they be paid separately for that time through the company? Like, how does that work typically? Because I don't know a single person whose BT has been in their IEP meeting with them. Not one person.
So behavior therapies from the insurance perspective are only given hours to work one-on-one with their kiddo. That is the only thing that a behavior technician will be paid for by insurance. So that could be the insurance reason. However, there is no real rule that says behavior therapists cannot be involved or should be involved. It's really agency specific.
Oh,
So
yeah.
per insurance, they technically don't get paid for that time, but there's a lot of money in this field that agencies could be paying for that hour meeting, and they
Sweet.
choose not to. Again, it could also be that the behavior therapist is the one doing the work, but they don't understand the meaning, or they don't understand why it's happening. The supervisor, the board certified behavior analysis, the B.C.B.A, they are the ones giving the goals and teaching the goals, but maybe not breaking down, this is why we're working on this goal. So the behavior therapist isn't necessarily the specialist in the field,
Yeah.
but they are, like you said, they are the ones providing all of the services, really.
Well,
so that
and
could be
as-
why they're excluded, but they should not be. They are there.
As much as I would love everyone to be there all the time,
Mhm.
you know, everyone has a full plate.
Yeah.
So even if that therapist was only in there for, you know, 30 minutes, 20 minutes, 5 minutes, just to give their piece of things, and then they went back. I mean, it's not, I know, what is it, 2 minutes you can't be without your client?
Depends on the insurance provider.
Right, but it's something
yeah.
like that, right?
Yes.
So, like, enough time to go to the bathroom and come
Yeah.
back. So that's interesting though, because it makes sense, but at the same time, they are the ones that are with them all the
Yes.
time. So how can we?
Yes. So if you have an upcoming IEP meeting, talk to the agency that your behavior therapist is paid through and ask them to be involved. The agency may say no, but they're not going to give you a reason why, unless they say insurance reason, but that's not a good enough reason.
My whole
Ask
thing is
and
the
advocate.
B.C.B.A has a full plate.
Yep.
You have how many kids technically are on your plate right now?
An actual number?
Yeah,
20.
20. So versus my behavior tech has one kiddo in the morning and my kiddo in the afternoon. That's it.
Yeah.
You're gonna get a much better gauge of things by talking to that person.
Yeah.
Okay, so we can work this out. We got it. We're
Yeah.
gonna read through the system.
Yeah. So definitely, if you can, get them involved, because they are the ones providing all of the work. The B.C.B.A is pretty much the supervisor. They come in to make sure things are going well. They come in to train. They come in to work with the kiddo one-on-one, but only a small percentage of the hours. So the behavior therapist is going to know every single time I tell this kiddo no, this is how they respond. Versus the B.C.B.A, the supervisor type of role, they're really only able to see it the couple times that they do see and accepting no while they're there. So if a therapist is given 20 hours a week, the B.C.B.A may only be there for 2 hours out of that week. The therapist is going to know a lot more information, so they should be involved. If you can, talk to your agency, talk to the school, even talk to the therapist and say, can you be involved with this? I know you won't get paid, so can you just hop in for 10 minutes?
Yeah.
Again, they may say no, but it doesn't hurt to ask. They should be involved if you can get them involved. So timeline rights for IEP meetings is that once your kiddo meets criteria to receive special education services, their IEP needs to be started within 30 days. So as soon as they meet that criteria, an IEP needs to be started within 30 days. That needs to be the immediate thing happening. If you don't have any type of update within 30 days, they're not meeting their goals. They're not meeting their regulations. If you're waiting 3 months for any type of IEP updates, or if it's finalized, that's an issue. It should be done within 30 days. IEPs are updated every single year. Again, it's only one IEP meeting per year. So you see them once, and then in that meeting, you talk about what happened the previous year, and you also kind of start talking about what's going to happen next year. So it's a very fast-paced meeting where they are just trying to get done because they have so many kids that they have to do IEP meetings for.
But that's why you take the time, because if you're not comfortable, guess who you're going to see next week?
Yeah.
I'm raising my hand.
And
Me.
so a lot of places recommend to have your questions already outlined, have a binder of every IEP meeting, of every note you get from the school, the teacher, whoever. So that way you're up to date and you're not going into the meeting and you're forgetting what happened 3 months ago, which was huge, but you're not thinking about it in that moment. Have everything written down with a list of questions and what you want to work on, so that way you're not wasting time and you can get your needs met.
Yeah.
If you have any disagreements with the IEP, say them. they have to change those IEP goals for you. So if the school says that we want to work on them identifying who a friend is versus who a stranger is, and you don't care about that right now, you're like, they're in kindergarten, I don't really care about that right now. I want them to be able to sit on the toilet. If that's more important for you, then say that, and they have to change that. You have to sign off and agree that I agree with everything happening. I want this to happen in the next year. You have to sign that. They also have to sign that. So if there's a disagreement, you guys have to resolve that before anyone signs.
So this is where it gets tough, when you have to know what, the goals can be.
Mhm.
So I see
Yes.
this a lot with, like, I'm not an occupational therapist or a speech therapist. However, I do see it a lot where they're only working on like handwriting.
Yep.
He types everything out anyway. Who actually writes anymore?
Mhm.
So frankly,
Yeah.
let's pick a different goal.
Yep. So that would be a perfect example. If you know that the school isn't really working on handwriting, then I don't want to work on handwriting. Let's work on them being able to type on a computer. Let's focus on them, or have them be able to focus on work tasks on the computer and not going to play all the games that are very accessible on the computer.
Yeah.
See what's relevant to your kiddo, their specific situation, what's happening in the
That time.
school,
Yeah.
and make those adjustments. Also, you have the right to choose what school you want to be in. If your student meets special education requirements, then you get that right to choose if they are in a public school, if they're in a charter school, if they're in a private school, and what school they're at. Because you have the special education plan, you have that flexibility to change up the schools. If you're in a private school, because they're not state funded, there's a little more wiggle room for the private school to say, no, I'm not giving you these services. So that's the only hindrance of a private school. But if you know that school A is really good, they have great teachers, they're well staffed, but you're assigned at school B, have them change you to school A. It may be a process, but you have that right to choose which type of school you want to be in. And then also when your kiddo turns 16, they have to start planning for transitioning out of school. So if your child is getting close to that 16 age mark, start bringing it up. We have to start transitioning. What does this look like? What supports do I have? How is this going to work? So that way they have time to figure out that transition period with you. And then during the meetings, every IEP meeting has to go over the present level of performance, which is it's simplified as PLOP, the plot. That just means what goals do they meet over the last year? What is their progress? Are they making progress towards their goal? So that way you have clear data saying, yes, they're making progress. No, they are not making progress. You also have to talk about annual goals. So what goals do you want to have met in the next year? They also have to tell you all the services that your kiddo is going to get. So if they're going to get speech in school, if they're going to get physical therapy in school, whatever services they're getting in school, what are those services and what supports do they have? Are they going to have a paraprofessional assigned to them? Are they going to have a behavior therapist assigned to them? Are they going to have specific technology and devices for them to meet their goals and to succeed in the school environment? All of that has to be outlined during your IEP. Okay, so now we're going to go into working with your child and understanding why your child behaves the way that they do. So the trick in applied behavior analysis, which is what I work in, is understanding why your child behaves the way they do. So there are 4 primary functions of why a child behaves the way they do. There's a 5th one that is question in the field, but definitely from a parent's perspective, I think you guys would understand it. So there are 4 functions. The functions are attention, tangibles, sensory, and escape. So attention is that I do behavior to get attention. I want you to talk to me. I want you to look at me. I want you to touch me. I want a reaction. So if your kiddo hits the dog because they want a reaction from you, good or bad, they don't care. They just want that reaction. If your friend likes to get drunk at the bar and start singing karaoke because they like the attention, there's a reason that they are doing their behavior. Tangible is any item. So I cry to my husband because I really want to go out to eat tonight. I want an item. So I'm going to behave to get an item. If your kiddo starts screaming at you because they want their iPad back, they're screaming at you to get that item from you. Sensory, also sometimes called automatic, is they are behaving because of the sensations they get. So they're rolling around on the floor because they like the way the carpet feels. They may be finger picking to the point that they're bleeding because they like the way it feels. A kid may hit their head against objects because they like the way it feels. They don't need anyone to give it to them. By them behaving, they get that input, they get that output, and that's what they like. And the last one is escape, which is essentially, I don't want to do this, so I'm going to run away from it. I don't want to clean up my room, so I'm going to run away from it. I am running away because I don't want to clean my room. I want to get out of this task. The fifth one that I mentioned is not fully approved in the scientific world, but there's also a control function where I just want to do this because I want to do this. I want it to go my way. Again, it's not fully approved, but we see this with our kiddos that they want their blocks to be lined up a specific way because they want it lined up a specific way. They don't want you to line it up the exact same way they're doing it. No, they want to do it themselves. They want to have control over that activity. So if you can understand why your kiddo is behaving the way that they do, then you can use that to your advantage and get them to learn, get them to listen to you a little bit better. So if you know your kiddo will work their ass off for M&Ms, get M&Ms, give them to them every single time they do what they're supposed to, or you ask them to do something and they do it, reward them. If your kiddo loves M&Ms and will work all day for M&Ms, but you give them a Skittle, they're not going to work. They don't want the Skittle, so I'm not going to do that work for you. But if you give me what I want, I'll do it. Absolutely. Same thing. If your boss says, we're going to change up the payroll this year, you're going to get books instead of a paycheck. Are you going to work? No, because you don't want to work for a book. You want to work for money. So that's how you need to be rewarded in order to get the work done. On the flip side, if you know that your kiddo really loves attention and they're doing something you don't want them to do, take away that attention. Turn off that behavior. But if they're doing something you don't want them to do and you're giving them that attention that they already want, they're going to keep going. They're getting exactly what they want. So they're going to keep behaving the way that they are. So essentially it is, I do this behavior to get one of these 4 outcomes. And if you know what that outcome is that your kiddo is looking for, you can use that to your advantage. And you can get them to do things, and you also take it away so that way they stop doing things. You can turn it on and off. And so some kiddos work really well with attention. They love being talked to. They love being praised. And then there's other kiddos, they don't want you to talk to them. They don't want you to look at them. So know what your kiddo likes, start learning what your kiddo likes, and use that. Use what they like to get what you want done. Take away what they like to get them to stop doing something that you may not want them to do. That's a great way to get your kiddo to make the progress you want them to make. And also give them choices. If you want your kiddo to clean up your room, clean up their room, give them a couple choices. Don't say, if you clean up your room, you get to go watch TV, because you're making that choice for them. Maybe they don't want to watch TV. Maybe they want to take a nap. Maybe they want to go outside. Maybe they want an ice cream instead of dinner. Tell them, okay, I need you to clean your room. What will you clean your room for? Do you want ice cream? Do you want TV? Do you want to take a nap? And with them having that power, they may do that task for you a little bit easier because they want what they want. Versus if you tell them what they're going to get, sorry, that's not good enough for me. That's not what I want. So I'm not going to do this work for you.
One thing I was trying to do at one point, but then I started to not get as creative, was to give them 2 options, with one option being absolutely ridiculous.
Okay.
Like, would you like to clean your room? Or would you like to clean out the barn, all the horse manure?
Yeah.
Because clearly they're going to choose that one.
Yeah.
But then the whole thing is, that's why I got stuck. Like, what if you actually chose the other one?
Will you get your barn cleaned out?
Well, I don't have a barn.
Oh, okay.
That's why I was trying to be creative, and then I was running out of creative, like actual things.
Yeah.
But, and then that just required too much thought.
Okay, so then you could flip it, same thing, but just skills up or
Clean
tasks
up
that they could do. Yeah, exactly. Clean up your room or clean up the toilet, your choice. You really want them to clean up their room, so they're probably going to choose that. So if that's the choice you want to get them on 2 evils, choose which one you want. I mean, at least you're getting 2 things cleaned. You're either getting the room cleaned, or the toilet. It may not be the one you want, but you gave them that choice. They're still cleaning something for you.
It's hard for me to give him a choice. I mean, you have to brush your teeth.
Yeah.
You don't have a choice.
Yes.
But technically, he does. He can choose to brush his teeth or not to.
Yeah. So there are some things that, like you said, toothbrushing, I can't give you that choice. You have to brush your teeth. But do you want to brush your teeth in the living room? Do you want to brush your teeth in the bathroom? Giving them some wiggle room, so that way you're not a huge you're not authoritative person. We're like, you have to do this way, this time, this long, blah, blah, blah. Give them that little bit of wiggle room so that way they have that freedom. They feel like they have a little bit more power, because they do. They do need to be able to make their own decisions. But also some things are, sorry, you have to brush your teeth. But here's your choices. Or the house is a mess. Do you want to clean up this room or this room? I need you to do your homework. Do you want an M&M? Do you want a bag of chips? Do you want to go watch TV when you're done? Giving them some choices will hopefully build their motivation to complete that task for you. And it'll also make it easier for you, rather than telling them you have to clean up your room and you're going to get chips when you're done with it. They don't care at that point. That's not what they want. Give them that freedom when it's appropriate. Okay, so the next thing we're going to talk about is follow through. So this is a huge topic with anyone and everyone. I understand that it's hard, but if you want something done, you're going to have to follow through. So I'm going to go through the very basic procedure. I'm going to talk about an easy way, or I'm going to give you an easy example, and I'm going to give you the harder example. At the end, we can role play this as much as you want to. I promise you I'll make you do whatever I tell you to do.
So I definitely feel that just a quick visual, high fives or handshakes. We all know what it feels like to do a wet fish handshake. It feels awkward. You gotta grab it and go with it. High five, you gotta follow through, or else it's just weird.
Yeah, absolutely.
So following through, and just picture it as like a wet fish handshake, because that's just gross.
Exactly.
Sorry to interrupt.
No, you're fine. Okay, so the follow through procedure is you're going to place the demand. And most of the time, if you're going to have to follow through, it's because your kiddo is not listening, or they're choosing not to listen, or they're choosing to actively ignore you. So you say, throw away the can, nothing happens. Your kiddo probably heard you, but they're choosing to completely ignore the demand, or they're just pretending like it didn't happen. The next thing that you're going to do is you're going to repeat that demand just to reinstate, this is what I want. So pick up the can, throw it away. They ignore you. Pick up the can just to reinstate, no, I'm serious. I want you to do this. And just in case the first time they really didn't hear you. People tell us something one time and we don't hear them. And that's you have to give them that little bit of wiggle room. So you don't know if maybe they didn't hear you or they're actively choosing not to hear you. So just say it one more time. After that, after you've said it twice, you're going to assist the kiddo with completing the demand. So if it's throw away the can, you're going to help them with that. What I always tell parents to do is start with as little assistance as possible and build up that assistance if they continue to not complete the demand. So start with minimal assistance, build it up, and assist your child until that demand or the activity is completed. So if it is having your kiddo throw away the Sprite can right here, telling them, pushing them a little bit to like, hey, over here, the can's over here. If that's you taking their hand, grabbing the can and walking all the way to the trash can with them, that's fine. But try to start off with minimal assistance so that they're doing the skill on their own. If you have to do the whole thing for them the whole time, they're really not doing the skill on their own. So give them that little bit of grace to see if they will finish it off once you push them to get started. So we're going to go over an easy example. So kind of like what I just said. So as a parent, you're telling your kid to clean up the blocks. Child continues playing with the blocks. So you restate the demand. The parent says, clean up blocks. Child again is not listening. They're continuing to play with their blocks. They're not cleaning up the blocks like you just asked them to. So what you're going then, like what you would do with minimal assistance, is you throw a block into the bucket and then you say, clean up. So that way you're getting very minimal assistance. You are just starting the process like, yeah, we're going to clean up the blocks. I'm going to get it started for you. And then again, this is easy. This is perfect scenario. The kid starts cleaning up the blocks because they see that you're serious. You already started it. Now, if the kiddo is not listening, it's a little bit harder. So you're going to build up your assistance. So you're going to start off with like putting one block in the bin. They're still not cleaning up. That's okay. So you're going to grab your kiddo's hand and you're going to have them pick up one block, put it in together with them, and then give them that second to see if they'll finish up the task on their own. If they don't, keep going. Keep scooping up blocks with their hands, putting it in. Scoop up the blocks, put them in the basket until the activity is done. Like, cool, we did. We cleaned it up. We're good to go. That way they are completing the task. You said the task and they are completing the task. Even if they are getting assistance, they're doing the task. And then as they get more compliance, they start listening a little bit better. You have that instructional control of, I told you to do something, I need you to do it. Once they're a little bit more compliant with that, then you can back off a little bit. But making sure that when you state something, that you are having them finish that task with you. I'll go into a little bit more
That's
details
hard.
about it a little bit later too.
I never,
No.
I end up doing it myself,
Mhm.
always.
Yeah, and so I'll talk about that a little bit later, but essentially if you tell them to do something and then you don't have them do it, they're learning, I don't have to do this. I don't have to listen to people in authority. They're going to do it for me. So why do I ever have to listen to anyone? And we'll talk about that a little bit later. So follow through is crazy important. I know it's hard. I know that a lot of parents see it as, okay, he doesn't want to clean up his blocks. I need him to clean up his blocks. But as soon as I tell him to, he's going to pitch a fit. So as parents, you may be like, I don't want to deal with that right now. So then you make it easy on yourself and you just clean it up. And so the mess is cleaned up, and then your kiddo never had to do anything. So it's definitely important to have your kiddo do that. So that way they're learning that they have to listen and that they know that they can't run all over you and that they have to listen when you ask them to do something.
And a major point is to realize how much that helps you in the future, not only your child. Because then you say it and they do it. And you have all that free time.
Right.
Yeah. So it's important for them to know it. And it's also important for you. So you have that break. You're not cleaning up after your kiddo 24/7. And then the tasks that you need to get done, like if it's just taking a shower for the day, you can't do that because you're having to clean up after your kiddo because they're not cleaning up for themselves. So the next thing we're going to talk about is compromising with your kiddo. So some kiddos can start compromising early on. Some kiddos need a little bit more time to pick up some skills before they can start compromising. So depending on your kiddo, depending on where they're at, they may be able to compromise, or this may be a skill that you work on later. But kind of like I talked about earlier, is that it's good for your kiddo to make decisions and have some power to make some choices. And it's also really important to teach them to advocate for themselves. If the kiddos never learn to advocate, then as they get older and they get into maybe trickier situations or in situations where they could be taken advantage of, they may not know that they're being taken advantage of because they just know someone says something, I do it every single time. So give them a little bit of those skills to advocate for themselves. But also understand that when you're told to do something, sometimes it has to be you have to do this. There is no compromise. Brushing your teeth, you have to brush your teeth. I can't compromise with you there, but I'll compromise with you someplace else. So the teaching process for compromising is first, the kiddo needs to be able to consistently follow instructions or demands. If they can't do that, then they really don't have the skills to compromise, because then they may over-compromise and they're like, well, I don't want to clean up my room. Can I clean up? Can I pick up this one teddy bear? Can I have spaghetti instead of macaroni for dinner? Like they may take the compromise as too much.
A negotiation.
Yes. And then they're negotiating too much to where they're not actually getting anything done because they're compromising, kind of appropriately arguing their way out of what they need to be doing. So if they're able to consistently follow instructions, then they can work on compromises. If they cannot, then work on consistently following demands first.
Jackson says, I'll do it later.
Later may never come.
Later is so later.
So one way to start working on teaching compromises is once they're able to follow instructions, give them two choices and they have to choose between those two options. So if it's bedtime and they typically get read a bedtime book, do you want to read Dr. Seuss or do you want to read Hungry Caterpillar? And they have to make a choice out of those two. They don't get to choose a third book. No, this is your choice. You get to choose between these two options. Once they're able to make a choice given 2 options, then just say that they have to make a choice. Okay, we need to read a bedtime book. What book are we going to read? And they get to choose any book that they want to. So that way they're able to independently make their own choices. And then once they're able to do all 3 of those, then you can start compromising with your child, and they can start compromising with adults. So if they need to go brush their teeth and they say, can I have 5 minutes before I go brush my teeth? You know that they have that history of when I ask them to do something, they do it most of the time. I do know that they can make their own choices if it's given 2 options, or they get a free range of what choice they want to make. If they can make those decisions on their own, yeah, maybe I'll give you 5 more minutes today. And so that way they get that compromise, and in those 5 minutes, check in and make sure that they go and brush their teeth. If it's, I don't want to clean my room because I'm still playing. Can I finish playing with this activity and clean up the rest of the toys? Letting them compromise with you so that they have that skill to advocate for themselves, but also that they will get their tasks done. If it's Friday night and they have homework to do, I don't want to do my homework tonight. Can I do it tomorrow morning while I eat breakfast? That's fine, as long as you know that they are going to do that, and that way you can stay on top of them and make sure that they do complete those tasks. If they get to the point where they are compromising with you and doing the skill on their own, so if it is, okay, no homework on Friday night, do it Saturday morning, and they start doing it on their own Saturday morning, perfect. Then that's a step away that you have to be so on top of your kiddo. You know that they can make their own choice. You know that they can compromise with you, so that way if they see something they don't like, they can advocate for themselves. I don't want to do homework on Friday night, but I will do it Saturday. It's still getting done. So that's if it's appropriate with your kiddo at their current stage, those are the simple ways to start teaching compromises. But if they're not able to follow demands consistently, like 80% of the time, then don't worry about it right now. It's not the right time. Okay, so 2 things that I want to make sure that everyone is avoiding. So when it comes to rewarding your kiddo, you want to make sure that you're not rewarding them too much to where they stop listening to you or they stop completing a task. So something that you may have heard before, or maybe some other therapists have talked about, is I cannot pronounce anything.
Satiation.
Yes, satiation. Okay.
Satiation is
Yes,
a word.
it is a word. It's hard to say right now. And so that is the reduced effectiveness of a reinforcer or reward due to an extended period of time with the item or repeated access to the item. So if
Like eating ramen noodles every day.
yeah, so if Lindsay loves ramen noodles, and I tell her, okay, if you clean the house every day, you get a bag of ramen noodles or a cup of ramen noodles. After a while, she's not going to work for the ramen noodles anymore. She's had it for 6 days in a row. She's done. I don't want ramen noodles anymore. I don't care about cleaning my house because I don't want the reward. So making sure that your reward system is going to keep up the behavior. So making sure that if your kiddo gets rewarded by their iPad, make sure that they get a little bit of time on their iPad, but they're not getting 6 hours with their iPad. Because if they do a quick task and they get too much of the reward, they're not going to do that task again. They're tired of the iPad after 6 hours, so I'm not going to do something else for you. So if there's too much of the reward, then it becomes less effective. Same thing where if you have to read, let's pretend we're all back in school and we have to read 6 chapters, and we give ourselves an M&M for every paragraph we read or every chapter we read. After a little bit, those M&Ms don't matter anymore. I'm tired of M&Ms. I've had 20 of them. I'm kind of sick. I'm not going to keep reading because I get an M&M. I don't want the M&M anymore. So some ways to avoid satiation is to provide small amounts of time with the rewards. So if your kiddo is working on toilet training, every time they go to the bathroom, give them a small reward. Give them 5 minutes on their iPad. Give them 3 chips versus giving them an hour of their iPad and a whole bag of chips. Because every time they go to the bathroom, which is consistent whenever you're working on toilet training, they're going to get tired of those rewards. So provide smaller amounts so that way you get more opportunity for that reward to be successful. Another thing is to vary the rewards. If you know that your kiddo loves soda, chips, M&Ms, iPad, and going outside, rotate those around. So that way, if they are working on toilet training, the reward isn't always going outside. They'll also work for some TV time. They'll also work for some soda. That way, they're still working on that skill without getting bored of the reward. Another thing is to pair rewards together. So you just went to the bathroom, great job. You can have a small bag of chips and you can also watch TV. So you get two things together. Or if they really love being sung to, sing to them and let them eat their snack. Or if they really like to stand on the table during their reward, they can stand on the table and listen to music. Just pairing two different things together or a couple different things together to keep those rewards fun and to keep them something that they want to keep doing. Another thing to avoid is empty threats. That's kind of going into the follow through. So with empty threat, it teaches your child that they do not have to listen to you. They do not have to listen to anyone in authority. So if their teacher tells them something and all they're used to is empty threats, they're not going to listen because they know there is no consequence. They can yell and scream at me as much as they want to, but there's no punishment. I'm good to go. It also teaches the child that there are no consequences. So every time you throw your block at the TV and it almost breaks, I give you an empty threat, like I'm taking away the blocks, but you never take away the blocks. They know, okay, I'm just going to keep chucking the block. Nothing happens. So that is essentially the whole thing of like the all bark, no bites. Kiddos will learn that mom's going to say a whole lot. She might be loud, but she's not going to do anything. I can get over her yelling at me for a second. So to avoid the empty threats, follow through. Every time you say something, follow through with it. So that way they know there are no empty threats. This is a fact. This is not a threat. This is going to happen. Also, just try to cut out the empty threats. It's a hard thing to do, but if you cannot do the follow through, stop giving empty threats. So that way they don't learn that they say something, but nothing happens to me. If there is something that happens that you need to change your mind, audibly change your mind and let the kiddo know that I'm changing my mind. So if you say, clean up blocks, we have to go, and you realize that you don't have time to clean up blocks, make sure that you say, you know what, I changed my mind. We're not going to clean up blocks. We'll clean up when we come back. That way the kiddo learns that you place the demand, you change your mind, not they didn't clean up their blocks, so they don't have to. It is you as the adult, you're the one making the decision to change your mind. If you don't audibly say that, then they may think, oh, mom said to clean up blocks, but then I didn't have to clean up my blocks, so I guess I'm good. Versus if you say it and you change your mind, they understand, oh, mom changed her mind that I don't have to clean my blocks, so mom said I don't have to, not that it was under the kiddo's control. So what I tell my parents to do is, if you say it, do it. If you don't want it to happen or you're a little bit iffy on if you want to follow through, then don't say anything. If you want the blocks cleaned up, but they don't have to be cleaned up, you're not going to die if they don't get cleaned up, don't say anything. Or if you say clean up blocks, they don't clean up, and you know that you don't have time to deal with a tantrum that may last 20 minutes, change your mind. Have all that power in your hands, not in the kiddo's hands. Okay, summary. So being a bad guy, you have to advocate for yourself and your kiddo. That includes any type of therapy they get. That includes any of the school meetings, any services you're getting, advocate for yourself because they're not going to do it for you. Also, hold them to their standards. Let them know that there are legal consequences, and you know that. You don't have to go into the specifics. Just like, I'm pretty sure you're supposed to follow that rule. If not, I will contact my attorney. They don't know if you have one or not. But if they hear that threat, I guarantee they will listen. And also that lets them know that they know what the expectations are. You know what the expectations are. And so they will not try to run all over you thinking that you don't know what's happening or what should happen.
Yeah. You know that I know that you know.
Mm-hmm. Also, make sure that you utilize your child's preferred rewards to your advantage. If you know they will do anything you ask them to do for a Snickers bar, use those Snickers bar. And at the same time, if they are not doing what you want them to, take those Snickers bars away. Use it to your advantage. If you want them to do something, give them their reward. If you know that they're doing something they're not supposed to do, take away something that they do like. Take away that reward so that way they follow through and they listen. As a parent, follow through with your demands. If you say it, do it. They have to do it. Or if they're able to, have that discussion and compromise with your kiddo. But if they're not, follow through. Every single time, follow through. And then understanding that even though you're a bad guy, it's good for you and it's good for your kiddo. It's going to be good for them now. It's going to be good for them later, especially when they're younger and they're earlier into their journey. let them learn now when they're younger, they're a little bit easier, so that way they don't have disadvantages and a lot of challenges later down the road. Work on them now while it's a little bit easier, so that way you're avoiding these much bigger problems if you forget or you don't choose to work on that skill for 5 years. And so that is the presentation.
So I have a
Yes.
question.
Go for it.
Recently, as in the last 2 weeks, and I'll use Saturday as an example.
Mhm.
I was making empanadas, and Jackson wanted to go outside. Well, we live where there's streets, all
Mhm.
around. Obviously, everyone lives by a street,
Yeah.
but I couldn't go outside with him at the
Mhm.
time. And he said, I'm gonna go outside whenever I want to. He's
Okay.
scripting it from something,
Mhm.
but he is using it appropriately.
Yeah.
Even though it stinks, he's still using it appropriately.
Mhm.
Can't wait to tell you guys what he did at school yesterday. But so today at the first baseball practice, he saw the newly opened park.
Mhm.
And I said, you gotta wait, because I couldn't see. It was over the hill.
Mhm.
And I had to get his brother situated.
Mhm.
I'm gonna go to the park whenever I want. And he walked away. And I'm yelling for him to stop.
Mhm.
He wasn't stopping.
Mhm.
I had to get the other kiddo set up.
Mhm.
By the time I got up to the top, at that point, well, I'm not going to cause a scene at the ballpark on the first day,
Mhm.
but I did get him off to get in the car to leave. But it wasn't a negative thing for him. He didn't learn a thing other than he is going to go to the park when he wants to.
Mhm.
So a script, but used appropriately.
Mhm.
And I don't mind making everything stop and wait whenever it's just us.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying like at a grocery store or a
Mhm.
restaurant. No, I consider that still just us.
Yeah.
I'm talking about a situation for a family dynamic
Mhm.
that can be socially isolating for his
Yeah.
brother and everyone else.
Mhm.
Picking a time when it's appropriate to have that, So now that I know this is going to happen, I can be prepared for it for Monday at the next practice.
Mhm.
So, but he's just blatantly saying,
Mhm.
literally saying,
Yeah.
I'm going to go to the park whenever I want.
Mhm.
And goes.
Mhm.
What would you do?
So, like you brought out, this was the first meeting for the softball,
Baseball.
baseball.
Yeah, literally.
So in that moment, you kind of have to weigh the pros and cons of, do I have my child who's clearly walking to the park when I asked them not to? Do I make the scene, which could negatively affect the other kiddo, could negatively affect us being invited as like a family to X, Y, and Z? So in that moment, I would not have caused a scene.
Yeah.
If it was,
he was safe. It wasn't like he
Yes.
wasn't. If it was an unsafe where he had to cross the road to get there, I would have tackled him.
Yeah. Yes. So that's another pro and con.
Right. Yeah. So,
Technically, he was safe.
It's situational,
Yeah.
obviously.
Yeah.
But now at home, when I was making the empanadas, and he's like, "I want to go outside.
Mhm.
I'm going to go outside whenever I want." And he walked outside. Now I did walk. He tried when we had a conversation back and forth for about a good 5, maybe 5 minutes, which is a long time.
Mhm.
And so he walked outside. So I just walked out there with him, and before he got off the deck, I said, "Have a seat with me."
Mhm.
And I tried to do it that way, but he still went out the door.
Yeah. So we still got outside.
Mhm. Yeah, he still went outside.
Yeah.
So to me, in his mind, even though he didn't get all the way to the swing set,
Mhm.
it was a win for him.
Yeah.
But I did get him back inside,
Mhm.
but I don't know if he learned anything.
Mhm. So that would be.
Is that a compromise?
It depends.
I can justify and make anything what I need it to be. So don't tell me if it is, if it isn't, or it isn't if it is.
So
I don't know what I just said.
It depends on really what he wants to do. If he just wanted to be outside and he wanted to sit on the deck the whole time, then he got exactly what he wanted. If he wanted to be in the grass and like
he wanted to go to the swings.
Okay. So in
which
that
he did
way,
not get to do.
It would pretty much be a compromise because he did go outside, but he didn't get to do the activity he wanted to because in that moment you couldn't let him be outside. You were doing something else. So
Right.
I think that is a good compromise, even if it wasn't a full, you
process.
can't have this. Yeah. It's still a natural compromise without like fully explaining, we're compromising right now. Here's your choices. This is the choice you're making.
Well, and that's something else too.
Mhm.
We do use very big words with our kids.
Yeah.
And these are kids that aren't
Mhm.
able to understand those words, and we're like, listen, we're going to compromise with you. And I'm just
Yeah.
using that as an example.
Mhm.
So, but yeah, I find myself using bigger and bigger words with him,
Mhm.
just expecting him to know what I'm talking about.
Yeah. And for some kiddos, having those discussions doesn't work because they may not fully understand everything that's being said. So like you think you're getting your point across, but they may not be retaining any of it.
Well,
So
and I think it's
Mhm.
important to say, you know, like when you're saying go clean your room, some kids may not know how to do it.
Yeah, absolutely.
So you do have to show them.
Mhm.
And as a room changes, how do you clean it now?
Yeah. And so
Because these
Mhm.
kids need that constant.
Yeah. And everything is going to depend kiddo by kiddo, situation by situation, which is why I have to give blanket statements.
Yeah.
So that way you kind of understand what I'm getting at and what I want you guys to do. But it's going to be specific. Like if your kiddo cannot clean their whole room, but they can
Mhm.
clean up this pile of blocks, have them clean up the pile of blocks. Or the blocks are scattered all over the room, put it into a pile for them.
I
and
think
then
managing
clean up.
our own expectations
Yes.
is really difficult because
Yeah.
I'm like, clean your room, let's go.
Mhm.
Or,
Yeah.
you know, to me, it's let the dog out, then let the dog in. Like you have one chore, you have
Yeah.
one thing.
And it is hard because we're so used to you say something and everyone else in the family understands what you mean, or everyone
Yeah.
else that you interact with understands. So it's hard to differentiate that with your kiddo, and you don't want to single them out. You don't want to oversimplify them or what their skills are. Because they
Right.
have lots of skills, but it's also
And you don't need to
controlling your
talk to a
expectations.
12-year-old like a baby.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Meeting them where they're at, regardless of where they're at. If they are 12 years old and you have to say one word statements to them, fine, that's where they're at.
Right.
If they're 12 years old and they're very argumentative and they want to go back and forth for 20 minutes on
It's child labor.
Exactly. And I have a kid like that, and it's always like that.
That's why I said it. I know a kid
Yeah.
like that too. Not my
So
own, but
that's in those moments, I can't have this discussion with you. This is what you need to do.
yeah.
And that's it. We're not talking about it. So it is specific to every kiddo, every situation, which makes it hard. You have to sit back and weigh the pros and cons. You have to figure out what's worth the effort, what's worth the scene, and also what's going to benefit your kiddo. But you also don't want to give them so much freedom that they never learn to clean up their room when you ask them to, or they never learn to follow your instruction when you tell them to. So it is a very fine line. I do understand that it's not easy and that there are times where something needs to be decided in the moment and you don't have time to weigh the pros and cons. That's okay. Just try your best. We make mistakes without having any type of diagnosis on us. That's fine. Just meeting your kiddo where they're at, understanding that your expectations have to be tailored to where your kiddo's at as well, and that not everything's going to happen the way we want it to. Nothing happens the way we want it to. And being
so
okay with that
frustrating.
and not hating your kid because of it or not thinking negatively about your
Resentful.
kiddo. Yeah, exactly.
And then having, you know, it's just such a family dynamic when you have more than one child,
Mhm.
you know, and having one kiddo do the one-step directions versus the other kid doing, you know, clean your
Mhm.
room, I'll be back in 20 minutes and it
Yeah.
better be done, you know,
Mhm.
very different.
It is.
My oldest teaches my youngest, which my oldest is not diagnosed with that. So she teaches her not to listen to me. She's very talk back and give me
Mhm.
attitude, and she's never been that way before. But
Mhm.
now as she's getting older, she's doing this and she's teaching my youngest.
Mhm.
And I don't know how to combat it because
Mhm.
to my youngest, her bigger sister is like her whole world. She
Yeah.
watches her all the time.
Mhm.
So I find myself more frustrated more and more every day.
Yeah.
Everything that you
Mhm.
said to do, as much as it is designed for kids on with the autism spectrum, you can use it on any kid, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. And then like specifically, if you're able to, I know every situation is different, but like if you're able to have that back and forth with the older kiddo in a separate room or like separated a little bit, that may help because it is having the younger kiddo understand that having both different ages understand that you have certain expectations, this one has certain expectations, and they're different because you're on different ages. You guys have different skill levels, but sometimes that's harder. And I have this with um a lot of kiddos that I work with that have siblings is one sibling's held to this standard, the other sibling is held to this standard. And it's confusing for the two kiddos who are seeing the different standards and are trying to figure out why. And some are able to understand, well, your younger sibling has a diagnosis, and we need to work on that. And the older sibling, like I know that I can trust them. They can do X, Y, and Z, or we're having a conversation about it. It is definitely hard to manage those two expectations with two different kiddos. I don't say that's easy because it's not. Like I grew up with siblings and one person got one thing, the other person got another thing, and I had no idea what was happening or why it was happening.
And
it's
all hell
hard.
broke loose.
Absolutely. And it's one of those things that you learn as you get older. It's not easy in the moment, but if you're able to separate a little bit, or like in the good moments, talking to your older kiddo, like, I can't have you do this in front of him. Please walk away to this other room. I will argue with you for 20 minutes. That's fine.
She doesn't seem to have that care that her sister is different.
Okay.
She'll always throw that up. And if we're arguing about something, she'll be like, well, Willow doesn't have to do it, or whatever the case may be.
Yeah.
And I just don't know how to. It's been like, she was 4 when Willow was born. She's 11 now. So it's like, how many years do I have to keep explaining this to you for you to understand it? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's really difficult.
It is absolutely difficult. And I hate giving this answer to parents, but it's also an age thing. Like when we were all teenagers, we were all little jerks.
Yeah.
We did not know the world, but we thought we did. And as we get older, we understand, wow, I was really a little shit.
Yeah.
Or wow.
And children are getting everything so much earlier. Teenage years are starting at 10.
Yeah.
Now versus what we did.
Yeah.
When I was 10.
Yeah.
I think I was skateboarding.
The same
Yeah.
stuff my daughter was doing. Yeah, it's definitely crazy.
Yeah, it's definitely challenging. There's not a good answer for that because it's the age, it's the maturity.
I mean, she
It's
does
also-
have her own issues too. Like there's ADHD, ODD, there's things there, just not that autism diagnosis, but it's still like, your rules all these years, don't try to change now because other people are watching you, meaning her younger sister. So
absolutely. If you're able to hold the standard of one sibling does this thing, the other sibling does that thing, and just maintaining that standard, even though there's pushback, I don't care. You can argue with me. I'm not arguing back with you. This is your standard. This is what you have to meet.
Yeah, that's pretty much the only way I've been getting through it. So,
yeah.
Because that's all she'll understand me saying. If not, she'll just go back and forth.
Yeah. And
I'll be there all day.
Yeah. And there are points where with anyone, you can argue back and forth all day long. And you kind of get to this point where like, my point's not getting across. All we're doing is arguing back and forth. We're getting more and more upset with each other. Kind of as the adult stepping back and like, this isn't worth it. And preventing that back and forth as much as possible. Again, it's not easy. No, that's not easy. But just trying to diffuse that situation as much as possible, especially if we've been working on this for years. You're not getting the point across. I'm not going to argue for 20 minutes in front of the younger kiddo who's seeing all of this and thinking this is okay. I'm just ending it now. Yeah. Any other specific questions before I turn off the recording?
Oh, I have one more.
Yeah.
I'm gonna think about it.
Before.
When we're talking about reinforcers, taking things away, my son will say, if I hit you, I lose electronics. What happens if I hit you? What if I hit you? And I say, you lose your electronics for 24 hours? Yep. Smack. He knows.
Yeah.
That's his only reinforcer. So what we've decided to do, and I will let you know how it goes.
That's okay.
We have decided to not really take away, but to add.
Yep.
You want to hit? Now you have to do your brother's chores for the night. You want to say a curse word? Okay, now you got to take out the garbage.
Yeah. Absolutely. And there's two different things in the field. It's reinforcement and punishment can be positive punishments where you're adding things that they don't like, and there's also negative punishment where you're taking away things that they do like. So taking away the electronics is that negative punishment. giving them more chores to do, positive punishment. So that could work depending on,
Good, there's a name for
yeah, there is. And so that may work, especially if they don't like to do work and you're giving them more to do.
it. Yep,
Then they may stop hitting because the taking away the electronic wasn't good enough for them. They were like, okay, fine, I'm still going to do it. I'll be fine without 24 hours without my electronic. But now if you're like, okay, you did that, you can have your electronic, but you have to do this, this, and this, follow through,
Yeah.
make sure they're doing that task so they understand you have to do all this extra because you did this.
right.
So definitely see how that goes. Some kiddos definitely work better with more work instead of having stuff taken away from them. It just depends kiddo by kiddo, what they work for and what they like.
And I think what's important for everyone to remember is that you can try these things.
Mhm.
And then if they're working or if they're not working, let us know. It's only the two of us
Mhm.
here, and I will relay any information and you'll get a parent's perspective and a professional's perspective
Mhm.
of how, either from experience, this is what I've tried, or this is what I know my friend tried, and then also the clinical side.
Yeah. And every kiddo is specific on what they will do, what they will not do, what they like, what they don't like, just like all four of us. We are completely different. I may work for a bag of chocolate and nobody else will. That's okay. Someone may work because they may complete tasks because they don't have to go to work the next day. We all work and we function differently. So our kiddos are going to do that too. And that can also change throughout their lives. That could change in the week. This week,
Yeah.
I love chocolate. Next week, all I want are potato chips. That's fine. See what those changes are and keep using those to your advantage.
It's always right after you buy whatever the first thing is in bulk.
Yep.
Because they get bored of it, they get
Yeah.
satiated with it, it no longer works. They had too much.
Yep.
So try something else.
Thank you. Thank you.
Absolutely.
And now we get to stuff our face.
We do. And I have to figure out how to turn this off every time. I'm just gonna let you do it. I just can't stop here.
And we stop recording.
There you go.
Thank you.